hidden beneath all of this talk around purpose and why and cause and belief and, all of these ideas, hidden beneath all of these things is every single one of us, yourself included, and every single person who's on this, listening today, every single person has the capacity to inspire other people. And once you understand what inspires you, when you live into what inspires you, you inspire other people to do the same thing.
Welcome back to the Experimentation podcast. My name is Sejan. Thanks to each and every single one of you who come back every time to learn, to execute, and to exploit for a better purpose. Right now, this conversation is something that I'm so excited about. I'm so grateful, and I couldn't be more excited to have Heath Slawner on the Experimentation podcast. So Heath is an incredible leader, an amazing influencer, and a performance expert who is absolutely optimistic. So Heath works alongside some of the world's leading thinkers and researchers to uncover how leaders can bring teams together to achieve extraordinary results. His insights on business communication and leadership with organizations impacted across the globe in companies including Boeing, DuPont, and Microsoft, etc. Driven by the belief that people thrive when they share a sense of purpose, Heath was invited to join the Simon Sinek's team in 2015, where he serves as an official igniter of the Start With Why movement. He is also a past board member and executive committee member of EQUITAS, International Center for Human Rights Education, whose mission is to help build a global culture of human rights through education. On top of all of this, Heath is one who is always empowering millions of people by making them conscious and realize why they do what they do and what they could do more better. And I can't wait anymore to invite and introduce you to the one and only Heath Slawner. Thank you so much for joining us, Heath. You speak a lot about finding why, right? And also finding passion about the people, and also, how they could amplify that to reach their levels, what they admire the most, right? But I want to know, tell us about when did that Start With Why movement happen to you personally? When you figured out that why, and how did that happen?
Sure. Well, I'll have to take you back a little bit, a couple of years. So there's a bit of a story. I met Simon, who has popularized the concept of the why.
Yeah.
I met Simon in 2010, and it's actually a bit of a funny story. I'll share it with you. We were speaking at the exact same conference at the exact same time across the rooms from each other. So he was in one breakout room and I was going to be in another breakout room. The book Start With Why had just been released about a year before. So it's 2010. And I remember being a little intimidated because the TED Talk was already starting to blow up. It was already starting to become a thing. And it was popular in its own way, not nearly what it is now, but back then it was starting to grow in popularity. And I had watched the video and I had shared it with people. So I was like so many others. And here I am at a conference where we're speaking at the exact same time. At the AV check the day before, I, in a self-deprecating moment, said to Simon, because we were doing our AV checks at the same time, to the organizer, I said to Simon, your room's going to be full and my room's going to be empty. Everyone's going to go over to your spot. Because I was a little insecure. I'd only been speaking for 2 years at this point. And I remember he sort of put his arm around me. At least that's how I think it happened. He put his arm around me and he said, Heath, don't worry. Both of our rooms are going to be full. And it was a really touching moment, because what he was saying is we're not in competition with one another. That your room is going to be full, my room is going to be full, and you have nothing to worry about. And the next day, lo and behold, what do you think happens? Of course, both of our rooms are almost full. I think his was probably to capacity. Mine was almost to capacity. And it's something that had stayed with me. And so Simon and I stayed in touch and we talked. Now, the funny thing is, I bet there are some people who wished that day that they had went to go see Simon in the other room instead of seeing me to do his golden circles. But that's another self-deprecating moment that people wish they would have seen Simon, because he doesn't do the circles anymore. That's the thing about Simon. He doesn't draw 3 circles anymore. So to make a long story short, I stayed in touch with him. And then in 2015, I joined the movement, the Start With Why movement, as an igniter. So up until 2015, I was like everybody else. The why, I'd heard about it, but I had not integrated it into my own life. But starting in 2015, when I joined the team, unofficially joined the team, really I started to see the power of purpose, the power of understanding and being able to articulate what it is that energizes and drives you. So I would say it started in 2015, 2016 that I was essentially forced. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I was forced to find my why. They sat me down. I went through the course. I worked with a coach and I articulated my why in one sentence, which now I articulate as connecting people and ideas so that we live with more meaning. So it's really about connection and meaning is what drives me, is what inspires me, is what energizes me. And what I've noticed is, prior to 2015, I think I was doing a pretty good job. I think I was doing a pretty good job, but I wasn't tapping into that extra energy. I didn't see myself as potentially inspiring other people. I was showing up like so many people do. I think I was doing a good job. I have a gift for speaking, I think. I certainly cared about what I did, but I didn't see myself as an agent of inspiration. And that really changed once I started working with Simon. And, hidden beneath all of this talk around purpose and why and cause and belief and, all of these ideas, hidden beneath all of these things is every single one of us, yourself included, and every single person who's on this, listening today, every single person has the capacity to inspire other people. And once you understand what inspires you, when you live into what inspires you, you inspire other people to do the same thing. So when Simon says, I inspire people to do the things that inspire them, it's really true. Like when you are aligned with what you believe, you give permission to other people to align with what they believe. And when more and more of us are in alignment with what we actually believe, I think that's when real change happens. So that's been for me since 2015. I started to really align with what energizes me, as opposed to I'm a speaker who shows up somewhere and gets paid and goes home. I saw my role differently.
Wow. But if I think if Simon had actually get a chance to listen to this, I think he'll be overwhelmed because he had his words and his part in your life. Maybe that's where the kind of a bit bend happened, right? But that was a reality, and you literally tried. Where there was a bend, right? You shifted back into the things went up, and the things that you have a capability of amplifying others' intentions that they could get to empower a lot of other people as well. Wow, you literally said it so beautifully, and that's an amazing story that you had, and I think that's so fortunate about it, and I'm so happy about it as well, definitely. But the thing is, I want to know, like, everyone out there who is the whole public is also saying Simon in the social media, just like that, and they have their view of Simon in their brain. Right? Just for me, I never met him. I always been seeing in his social media and the TED Talk I met him with, and I have the copy of Start With Why next to me, but I couldn't take it because so it's I get it and I read it whenever I'm mood off. So the thing is, we all have Simon as one of the perspectives in our brains, right? But the person who has been a bit closer, they have a different and a more realistic perspective than the rest of the other world who sees from social media, right? Now, I'm really, really, really curious to know your perspective and your kind of version of Simon in your brain that actually near to you. So who is he actually?
Sure. So if I'm understanding you correctly, Teja, you want a little bit of inside perspective. You want the inside view. Yeah. I'm absolutely thrilled and happy to give you the inside view. And I just want to touch on what I think you're talking about, which is sometimes we have our heroes, right? And we see them, on TV, or we see them in movies, or we see them in interviews. And we think to ourselves, they're like that in public, but they're probably a different kind of person.
Absolutely.
Privately. And here's the most beautiful thing about Simon, which is one of the reasons I believe his sort of popularity has not waned, is that the person that you see in public and his viewpoints and his philosophy, it's actually true. Like, that is who he is. He is that guy. And he doesn't, he's not lying, faking, or hiding in one place so that he can be something else in another. And that's what Simon, he often warns us about on our own team. He's like, if you're lying and faking, and I mean lying, I don't mean lying to other people. I mean lying to yourself. I'm not talking about, you go up to someone and say, oh, those are beautiful shoes, and they're not beautiful shoes because you just want to make them feel good. I'm talking about the lies that we tell ourselves, that, we're good enough, or we're not good enough, or we're making enough money, or we're not making enough money. I'm doing a good job. I'm not doing a good job. Like, the lies that we tell ourselves, and how sometimes we fool ourselves. Like, we're the easiest person to fool, right? Yeah. I'm not sure who originated that statement, but we're the easiest people to fool. So Simon, I remember once sitting with him on retreat. We had a retreat. We have a retreat every 18 months, but 2 retreats ago, we were sitting late at night, just chatting and talking. And Simon was telling the story about how, he has maintained and stayed true to his values, even like when he didn't have any money. Because a lot of people say, well, once you have a lot of money, like, oh, you have it easy. You could do whatever you want. He was saying no to clients, even when he had no money. When he first started out, people would come to him and say, I'll pay you a couple $1,000, come and do this, come and do this. And whenever anyone turned out to like be difficult or not believe what Simon believed, he would say no to them, and they would double the offer, and he would still say no because he wanted to stay true to himself. And I think the story that I told before about him putting his arm around me and saying, we're not in competition with one another, that idea of you and I not being in competition with each other shows up in his Infinite Game book 11 years later. So he really is someone who's true to himself. Now, if you want a little bit of insight into Simon and his personality, I hope he doesn't mind that I say this. He's a funny guy. He seems really serious on stage, but he's a bit of a cut up, I would say. Like, he likes being not a practical joker, but he's a bit of a joker. Like, he likes having fun. And I don't necessarily think that comes across in public, his public persona. But, the truth is, I've worked with a lot of important people and important writers and authors, and sometimes those people are not nice people in private. They don't make time for you. They're not generous with, they're not emotionally generous. They're not psychologically generous. They're a prima donna. They're a diva. They're a drunk. They show up late. They're not respectful. They don't have the determination. Simon is none of those things. Like, he is true to his word. What he says and how he behaves are very much aligned. And I find that very inspiring. And I would argue that that's one of the reasons why, Start With Why as a book continues to sell more copies every year than it did the year before, which for a business book, if you think about that, is astonishing that it continues to sell a couple of 100,000 copies every year. That's unheard of in the world of business books, that it continues to remain popular. It's astonishing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if Simon is actually listening to this, he'll be really happy, knowing about the path about he has been creating, and also his own perspective. I mean, your own perspective of him in your brain that it actually differs in a bit different. And you said it's funny. Let's see how he would react to you back. And maybe that's true. Yeah, absolutely. In some videos, I used to find Simon is cracking a bit jokes, but they are so true and deep into optimism, right? They reveals the inner optimism without hurting others. So maybe that's a kind of a way people have different styles of storytelling, and you have an absolute one that I really love when I've been following your videos in online. That's a kind of a skills that very rare in the world has, and absolutely that I think you've been, training people and also mentoring people who are the leaders, right? Who are the actual leaders. But when it actually comes to, people who've been leading a lot, and the most common question that you get to ask, and I'm going to ask the same thing for you now as an initial phase. So what it meant to be a good leader for you specifically, like what it meant to be a good leader, what it all takes to be a good leader.
Wow. That's a huge question. And I invite everyone to go to Google and type in the word leadership, and you'll see millions and millions and millions of entries. It is just like an incredibly popular topic. And I'm willing to say this right now. I am not willing to say that there is one way to lead. And if I can say one thing about leadership is, I spend time with Paul Hersey. Paul Hersey is the situational leadership guy. So this is a concept that came out, 30 or 40 years ago. So situational leadership essentially says that you give people what they need at a specific time, that a high performer needs something different than, it's my first day on the job. And I truly believe that different people need different things. But what do all leaders have in common? All leaders have in common, they have followers. They're all great, inspiring leaders are willing to take care of the people around them. That's the definition of leadership that I have adopted, that leadership is not about your title. I don't care that you're a senior vice president. Leadership is not about, you're a director or you're a business owner. Has nothing to do with your title. If you are a member of a team, if you are part of a group, you have the opportunity to lead. And the reason I say that is because leadership is really about taking care of the people around you. And whether you're a son in a family, you have an opportunity at certain times, it's going to be dependent on you to take care of maybe your younger brother or your older brother or your parents who get sick. And you may only be 11 years old and you have to step up to the plate and be a leader. Maybe it's just for a week or two. Yeah. Maybe it's for a couple of years. You have no idea. But that opportunity is there. And so it's really up to us. Do we seize the responsibility? Do we take on the awesome responsibility to help other people move forward, to help other people rise, to help other people get better when they're sick, to improve when they're not doing as well as they think they can do, to give them, an inspirational word so they can get through a difficult day because they're tired and worn down and they're not feeling right? I think everyone has the opportunity to do that. And I wish more and more people saw themselves as a leader, small L, because the opportunity to take care of the people around you and help people live richer, and I don't mean money, I mean richer in terms of well-being and fulfillment. The opportunity to help people live richer, more meaningful lives is infinite. I mean, that opportunity is always around you. You can do that in a conversation. You could do that in family. You could do that at work. So there's many things that people say about leader. They need to have a vision. They need to be smart. They need to have charisma. They need to be able to speak. I'm not sure about all of that, but for sure, the one thing I do know is that inspiring leaders are willing to sacrifice for the people around them. They're willing to put other people first. And that's my definition of leadership.
Wow. That's beautifully said. And the way that you be so much optimistic, even in the way that you present, that literally touched with me. And I think it will be staying with me for my entire career of leading and something taking it off. But here's the thing, right? When we try leading, and I never call myself a leader because I have a community that I take care. So I take care of the people. What you mentioned is actually hitting me so hard, right? There is moreover, we care about the people than to actually lead them, right? The lead them actually feels a bit weird for me, but moreover caring them. But what instantly happens most often and fairly often, we get to find there are a lot of conflicts. I don't know, is that a fault with me on my end or for the people at their end? So I get too confused. When there is a conflict between two people in my team, I genuinely get this conflict. I get to question myself. Is my leadership is any backlogs or any things that I'm not making it so good leadership, or the team is not correct, or their visions, our missions are actually not aligned with our purpose? So I get to question a lot. But I want to know genuinely, how do you resolve such conflicts in a team? And how could others also, who are the leaders, who are having teams, who are trying to take care of the people in the team, could actually solve and resolve the conflicts in their teams?
Yeah, so, this is interesting. And, I before I started with Simon, and even before I was with Charlie Green and Trusted Advisor and working with Dr. Cialdini on influence, we used to do workshops on conflict and how to handle conflict. And if there's one thing I've learned about conflict is that people don't see conflict in the same way. Some people see conflict as really productive. I need that tension. I want to lean into that tension because I know I'm going to emerge stronger on the other side. Other people find conflict exhausting and will avoid it at all costs. I know in my own family, I have a couple of family members, like my mom. She's willing to have any conversation. My dad doesn't want to talk about it. and you find the same kinds of personalities, you find the same kind of preferences. This is really about preferences. You have the same kind of preferences at work or in community or with your friends. I'm sure you have a couple of friends who like, yeah, you have a problem, come talk to me. And you have other friends that are like, no. Like they will avoid your calls and not take your calls for days or weeks because they know you're angry at them and they're just not interested. So I think the first step is understanding that not everybody sees conflict the way you do. And if you try to impose your view and your preferences on other people, it's not going to go very well. It's really not going to go very well. So that's number one. So you have to acknowledge the fact that people have different preferences. They have different thresholds. Now, once you acknowledge that, the key for me, this is what I've learned over my experience, is it's got to be safe. To resolve conflict, it has to feel safe, because what happens is conflict is really there's a difference. You see something one way, I see something another way. We have a difference of opinion, we have a difference of priority, we have a difference of preference. You want to go do it this way and I want to go do it that way. It could be as simple as I want to leave at 4 o'clock and you want to leave at 5 o'clock. You like to get to the airport early and I like to get to the airport on time. When do we leave the house? And then we have a discussion about it. Do we compromise? So it's really about difference. So there's an element of negotiation there. But unless it feels safe to express how I feel, because there's always feelings underlying the differences. Like I just feel like being late is, going to the airport, being late, being on time puts me at risk of missing my flight or missing my train or missing my bus or whatever it is. And you feel like you don't want to waste time at the airport or the train station or the bus station because I could be doing other things. So you have to understand that preference, and then it needs to be safe to express my feelings around the difference. And until you do those two things, you're going nowhere. Now, once you have those two things out of the way, you appreciate that people see things differently, especially conflict. You've made it safe for someone to express their feelings. Now, you also have to ask yourself, how do I make it safe for someone to express their feelings?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a whole other podcast. But simply put, people need to know that you have their back. You have to listen actively, and you have to listen with soft eyes as opposed to hard eyes. So listening with hard eyes is, really? That's what you think? I can't believe it. Why would you say that? You do that one time, I promise you, Teja, they're never going to share an idea with you ever again because you've just judged that idea. You have to listen with soft eyes, that's so interesting that you see it that way. Tell me more. So you have to invite people to share their point of view, because not everyone is an extrovert who is comfortable standing on top of the mountain saying, this is what I believe, this is what I think. Some people are a little more guarded. They're more reflective. And so you have to hold the space for them to share their feelings, and you have to listen with soft eyes. Yeah. So the first thing is difference. The second is make it safe. Listen with soft eyes. And then you have to, you have to continue to hold the space to how are we going to resolve these differences? And your bias has to be, you have to hold this mindset that if we're able to resolve this conflict, we are going to emerge stronger on the other side. In other words, how can we shift our mindset from conflict is bad to conflict is productive? How can we shift our mindset to conflict is uncomfortable to being comfortable with the discomfort? And listen, it's easier said than done. I can give you the 3-step process. And one thing I've learned as a trainer is I can give you the 3-step process, and then you get 2 people in the same room together and everything falls apart and people start crying, or they're yelling, or they get upset, or they get defensive, or they shut down, or they raise their voice and they just walk out of the room and say, screw it, it's not worth it. Yeah. And that's where I think it all falls apart, when you're like, it's not worth it. And it's easy to get there. It's not worth it because conflict can be exhausting. It's exhausting.
Totally. Oh my God.
Right?
I think that made me to actually, touching upon the things that I actually gone through into my memories of dealing with conflicts, but what you mentioned is so true, is about, how about you transform, which is you feel like a barrier, into something that becomes more productive, right? And the way that we actually think and we try to transpose something to transform another thing is actually so much powerful, and we all could do that. I mean, the whole thing that which is lacking is actually the mindset and the implementation. Right? And that's very, very true. And again, so there was a times where one of my friends is also with me to take care of the people around, where as we grow up, as we start at the initial days, they're like really empowered, really powerful, really active, and they're doing everything that we said, and they're doing everything what we wanted to, and they wanted to, and we all wanted to build something that we all trying for and striving for. We're all doing the thing that but after a certain amount of time, like after a couple of months, the graph grows down. The productivity and the people performance goes a bit down in the sense of doing and giving something towards the whole community or everything, right? So it gets a bit down, and the activeness goes a bit down. What I feel is there is a lack of a bit motivation, right? And there was instances where my friend actually tried having up a call with the entire team and actually telling and making them to know that the team is going very inactive, right? And he literally said that, but I just stopped him, and I felt it a bit hard because it may hurt them, right? Because we know it's not about we're not supposed to make them hurt, because it leads into different things, right? But here's the question. But he asked me another question, like how you could make them empowered them, like how you could make motivated and do the work as they are doing in the initial stages, right? How you could get back such energy in them. So I was clueless, and I wrote down this question today in the morning before we have called to ask you. And I think this will definitely help the people towards everyone who's having a similar situation about the energy levels getting down over a certain amount of time, and dealing with the team softly is one of the biggest challenges, right? So what's your approaches on getting back that energy?
So, energy is the key word here. And how do you tap back into that extra energy? I talk about energy all the time, because what happens is it goes up, and then it can wane, and then you lose some of that motivation and you lose that inspiration. And I think one of the reasons people lose the inspiration is because we literally stop talking about what inspires us. And so if I had one piece of advice for anyone who finds, my team just doesn't have what it used to have, we've lost that magic, or, people are not coming up with those great ideas anymore. And, we're just not showing up for our customers. We're not showing up for each other. We're not showing up for our partners, our stakeholders. Like a year ago, we would have done that in 3 days. Now it takes us 3 weeks to do the same thing. If you've lost it, here's my advice. You need to get the team together. Now, if it's virtually, you do it virtually. If it's in person, you do it in person. Of course, with COVID now, it's probably virtual. You need to get the team back together to re-energize them. And I think the way that you do that is you hold the space for the team to talk about what truly inspires them. And it's really a storytelling exercise. And it's a sort of a version of what we do on Simon Sinek. We have why discovery sessions. So why discovery, when a company wants to find its why, we will host a session on discovering the why. But then every year or every couple of years, we still need to have what we call jumpstart sessions. We need to have listening sessions where you get a team, or you even have one-on-ones. You could even have one-on-ones if you're a supervisor and you have an employee who's really lost their spark, but they're really talented. You get that employee in a room, and hopefully you make it safe, because remember, people see conflict differently, and if they don't feel safe, they're not going to share their feelings. So don't ever forget that. And then you ask them this very simple question. And this is the exact same question that we do in our workshops, in our listening sessions, in our jumpstarts. Recently, what has made you feel proud to be part of this team? Recently, what has made you feel proud to be part of this community? And that conversation opener, I think, will help unleash the energy that you're talking about, because typically it's not a lack of talent. It's a lack of energy. Yeah. It's not a lack of intelligence. It's a lack of motivation and inspiration, that people get fatigued. They get burnt out. And if one thing that COVID has taught us this year is that we are all anxious, overwhelmed, and uncertain. And it's really helpful to go back to the sort of virtual, when people used to, like thousands of years ago, people used to sit around the fire and tell stories. You got to go back to that telling stories. It's the stories that connect us. It's the stories that give us energy. It reminds us why we're doing what we're doing. And when things are busy and when there's so much change taking place and you're anxious and overwhelmed and uncertain, it's so easy to forget, what are we doing here? What are we even doing here? And we have to reconnect back to each other. And we have to reconnect back to the human reason, human reason, not the money, not the social media numbers, not the 1,000, 1 million, 2 million downloads. It's not about the followers. Like, we get so caught up in the metrics that we forget the impact that we're having on people. The stories about a business owner or about a friend or about a customer or about a client who did something that they didn't think they were capable of doing. How we lifted someone who was in a difficult situation. We lifted them up and they were able to take care of their family. It is those stories that help us reconnect not only to the human reason, but to each other. I've always said, whether you're in community, whether you're in a job, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're running a small business, a large business, a government, public sector, private sector, it's our emotional connection to each other, Teja. It's our emotional connection to the work that drives long-term results. And let's face it, on the journey, you're going to run out of fuel every once in a while. You're going to feel empty. You're going to feel low. And it is those stories that give us the fuel to continue on, to endure, to make it through the difficult moments. So what I would say, it's less about you can't come down from the mountaintop with inspiration. People need to find their own inspiration. And the way you do that is you hold the space for people to tell the stories and share those moments that make it feel worthwhile, those proud moments that make them feel like this is where I want to devote my energy. They have to come to that realization themselves. There's literally nothing you can do. I mean, even me, I'm in the business of I'm in the business of inspiration. There's only so much I can do in an hour. I can inspire someone for an hour, but then what happens the next day? You need to be the source of your own inspiration. And I think as leaders, we can hold that space and give people the opportunity to be their own inspiration and be inspirational for one another. That's my answer.
Wow. And also one other thing is that they could able to, and the leader is also maybe able to, could help them to find their inspiration, right? Is that true?
Absolutely, 100,000%. And not only can the leader help them find the inspiration, but by being a leader who is authentic, and authentic is a big word and everyone throws around. What does authentic mean? It means everything you say and everything you do, you actually believe. So your what, your why, and your how is all aligned. Yeah. Absolutely. Not only can the leader hold the space so that others can find their inspiration, but by being an authentic leader who stands up for what they actually believe, and it sounds simple. Stand up for what you actually believe. Of course you're going to do that. But every single day we see examples of leaders who do the easy thing as opposed to the hard thing, who do the expedient thing as opposed to the right thing. But if you stand up for what you believe, not only do you inspire other people, like, wow, I'm really inspired by that leader who made a difficult choice. Instead of laying everybody off during COVID, they found a way to furlough a few employees, to do this, to cut some costs here, to reduce over here, and they kept every single employee employed. I'm super inspired. Not only can you do that as a leader, but you can also give permission to every single person who you touch to also stand up for what they believe. That's what I said before. Like, the hidden secret of purpose is you not only inspire other people, but you give them permission to do the hard things.
Yeah, totally. But I think when we continuously and effortlessly and doing it so far, so forth, I think it eternally builds the trust. I think it actually builds the belief that they could believe in the leader and take it absolutely, right? Wow. I mean, I think I could able to recollect and reflect back your thoughts into the things what happened or what are the mistakes that I have been doing so far where I could actually patch them up and let's see how it works. Like, I wanted to experiment and I'm really excited more now to try all your ideas and put it in forward. And absolutely. But here is another trouble what most of the leaders out there who are actually trying to build and grow and take it to the next level of they admire is that trying to measure the performance, right? They always tend to try to measure the performance, how well it's going, how fast it's going, and how good it's going, right? They try to do that. So, but the thing is, people most often, they tend to look at the growth with money, how much the money has been generated in the month with the team. Like, we tend to, if the money is more highly generated, then the team efforts is more high. But I don't think that's a true thing, right? Because even the people who are not even fine with their inner self, with the heart set, they can still generate more revenue. But the question here is, I get to ask, and I've been still figuring out, what are the actual metrics, the actual effective metrics that could actually help a leader to understand the wellness of the team, the how well they are performing in the team, as a team.
Yeah. So you're really talking about the Holy Grail, the Holy Grail of organizational health and individual health, and collectively, how well are we doing? And I do not think there are nearly enough metrics. Sure, companies do engagement surveys, and they usually have 10, 15, 20 different metrics, these pulse surveys as they call them. And it's fantastic. And the numbers go up by 3%. And the C-suite says, yes, we did it. We went up by 3%. And people are still miserable. So I don't think we've solved for that problem. If the job to be done is figuring out what's the level of wellness in an organization, I don't think we have solved for that problem yet. There are a lot of companies, Teja, who are trying to solve for that problem. 15Five is one of them. Gsoft is another them. These companies that are trying to develop the software so that you doing this more regular check-ins with your employees to find out how are they feeling, how are they doing, is what they're doing connected to what they believe, the whys and the hows, are they interconnected, are they linked? And so there are companies that are trying to solve for this. Patrick Lencioni, who, is big on organizational health. He has, at the Table Group, he's got a ton of resources that I encourage your listeners to check out. That's Patrick Lencioni. Maybe you can put that in the notes at the Table Group. So there are companies that are trying to solve for this. And, just at its simplest level, what we're trying to figure out is what's the balance between, Simon talks about this a lot, what's the balance between will and resources? So the will is like the idea of wellness. How do we feel? Because there are a lot of companies that are successful and their people are miserable. I don't know if you remember, there was the article on Amazon and the culture at Amazon a few years ago that came out in the New York Times. And everyone was mortified that a woman who's pregnant delivers her baby on a Wednesday and is forced to come back to work on a Friday. People were mortified at the culture at Amazon, and how could the richest person in the world, Jeff Bezos, create that kind of culture where it's work, 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 work. And there was a bit of a blowback because some people said, I like working here. I want to work in a place where it's driven to succeed. And I am interested in the money. You talk about Netflix or Microsoft or the companies that people hear about all the time. These are hard driving cultures. It's not let's coddle each other and they may have unlimited vacation, but you better be working. Otherwise you're out. We want to be surrounded by A players. So I think, no one's solved for this yet because different cultures expect different things. And you could be really successful and the people are miserable. Teja, I'm sure you know people who are successful in their careers, but they're nasty and they're mean and they're not nice, generous people. They walk around with an arrogance like they're better than everybody, which proves that you could achieve material success and still be miserable. And in fact, a lot of people who have money, they're not nice, they're not happy, they don't have a sense of peacefulness and well-being. Conversely, I know people who don't have a lot and they're absolutely at peace. And they're absolutely with a sense of well-being. And they absolutely have a sense of fulfillment in the work that they do. And listen, at the end of the day, it's really about living a life of significance. Too often we're measuring the numbers. We're measuring the CAGR, we're measuring the revenue and the market share, and the numbers are great. On December 31st, we were number 2 in market share. And it's but everyone's miserable because you drove them to the point of exhaustion. We're number 1 in our, in our division or whatever, according to our benchmarks, but everyone's unhappy. So I think we need to find the balance, and I don't think we've found all the right metrics yet. You mentioned trust before, Tej. I'll make this one last comment. We have so many metrics to measure performance. We have so few metrics to measure trust. Yeah. Trust with each other, trust on the team, trust of our leaders, trust of the corporation. You know, Edelman comes up with a trust barometer once a year, but that's about it. On a team, they rarely talk about how trustworthy people are on the team. But metrics on performance, have you seen these performance management systems that exist? I can rate you on all of these things. Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do that? And it can be exhausting. But trust and the soft stuff, I don't think we've solved for that quite yet. But there are companies that are trying to do it. And hopefully we'll share that in the notes.
Absolutely. Wow. Everything that you say is actually much more relatable and much more deeper. I thought in the beginning of the conversation that I need to take you deep, but what's happening is completely reverse. You are taking me so deep in a way that I could relate to the things that are actually happening. Thank you so much for that. And I think the same thing happening with the people out there, because when they actually do, unintentionally and subconsciously, they do it in a flow, not realizing what would be the eternal effect. Right? What would be the entire effect that would be having on the team, and how it would be reflecting back into the outcomes, right? We never know. And the thing, when we try making such decisions, I think there need to be a lot of thought process behind it before making such decisions, right? So anyhow, I mean, these things and everything should definitely help others to have a similar kind of a thing about all. It comes again, back to back, whatever you meant, everything comes to taking care of the people. Right? I mean, I tried asking you a few questions in between, but what happens, everything relates to taking care of the people back, right? Yeah. I mean, any questions you come up with, everything comes under between, and it goes up to taking care of people. Because that's the end, right? That's where the thing, actually the base foundation, the rock bottom, which becomes so stronger when you keep doing it every time, right? Yeah. And totally. And so here's a very common question that I would like to ask you back to back. So as you all being leading with people and also helping multiple businesses to take it and move it forward. So what are the common mistakes that usually people do in their team? And why am I talking about this? Because I don't want the listeners who are listening to this don't want to do that. Because those mistakes, what you have seen, if you could actually share it across, they could relate to their work if that was a mistake. And maybe that if they didn't, they should always have a disclaimer about such kind of thing happening. So can you just share about your experience when you are dealing with your businesses and your clients everywhere? So what are those common mistakes that you don't want others to do in their team or everywhere?
Yeah. Oh my goodness, I love this question. And it's the first time anyone has asked me this question. So what I'm doing is it's great. I'm processing and reflecting. Because one of the things, I never talk about this, but after every talk, invariably, and this is pre-COVID, invariably someone would come up to me afterwards and say, "Thank goodness for your talk. I'm so grateful. You inspired me. This is amazing." And then immediately they tell me about how they've been struggling and what they are, enduring and experiencing at work. And it's really draining their energy and they don't understand. And why are people doing that? And so here's what I've learned over the years is from I'm going to answer it in two ways. So part one, what are the mistakes that leaders are making?
Yeah.
So leaders like supervisors and managers and bosses. So the mistake that bosses and managers, the mistake they're making is they say one thing and they do something else.
I get that.
And that drives people bananas. Absolutely bananas. And it destroys the culture. I often tell this story when I'm giving talks. I before COVID, I used to go to hotels all the time. And you would check into a hotel, and sometimes there was this one hotel that had a sign in the front that said, we treat every guest like we treat every customer like they're a guest in our own home. And it's such a beautiful sentiment. Like you're coming home at a hotel. Like what's a hotel for? To make you feel comfortable. Be at home. Yeah. You're our guest. And then you get up to the room And when you go to put your clothes away, and they have the no theft hanger. So I don't know if you know what I mean by no theft hanger. It's the little itty bitty hanger. Instead of it being the full hanger, it's a miniature hanger. Okay. And the reason they have this miniature hanger is because they don't want you to steal the hanger. But I remember when you go into a room, at the front desk it says, be a guest in my home. And you get into the room and it says, don't steal my stuff. And it's a disconnect. And it's the disconnect between leaders who stand up and say at the beginning of the year, our people are our most important asset. You know, our people are our most important resource. You know, we're nothing without the contribution of our people. And then you have a meeting or a decision is taken that we're not going to allow certain people to work from home, or we're not going to allow people to take time off to be with a loved one or a sick one, or take time off. And the decisions that they take and the things that they say are not aligned, and it drives the people bananas, and it destroys the culture. I mean, it happens all the time. A company says, you know, we put our people first, and then they force you to sign these legal agreements that are completely one-sided.
Yeah.
It's bonkers. It's bananas. Don't tell me the people are the most important thing and then put the legal stuff as more important than the people. So all of this, that's to me, the biggest mistake, and it drives us all bonkers. You know, and I could go on. We could spend a whole hour talking about the things that leaders say and the things that they do, and then the impact that it has on people. Now, what's the other side of the coin? The other side of the coin is employees, individual contributors, who themselves can be leaders, are not stepping up enough. They see themselves as victims of the system. And if they were willing to speak up, and if they're willing to stand up, and they were willing to defend their points of view, things could get better. And we could hold leaders accountable for the disconnect between what they say and what they do. But there's a third part of this. And the third part is, why don't we stand up? Why don't we step up? Why don't we say what we actually believe and hold the leaders accountable? And I'll tell you, the simple answer is, we don't feel safe. And the reason we don't feel safe is because the one time that we did stand up and say something, a leader looked at us and said, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
I'm offended that you would ask me. So we don't feel safe. So it's not a virtuous, it's a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a circle that just goes around. You know, leaders are not in alignment with what they say and what they do. Employees are not stepping up and holding people accountable. And the reason they're not doing that is because they don't feel safe. And so the leaders go back to their offices and back to their houses and back to their homes, and they think everything is fine. The employees go back to their desks and they're like, everything is screwed. And nobody does anything about it because the leaders are too far away from actually knowing what's really going on. And they take the engagement survey once a year or once a quarter, and they went up by 2%, so everything's good and we don't have to deal with it. And then you have your once annual meeting, and you tell them the results, and you have some things, and you do some breakouts, and everything is fine. And the system just goes on. And it's good enough, and we've settled for it, and it's sad because we can do better. We could do better, Teja. We could do better.
Absolutely. Wow. It feels me even more empowered when I get to listen to such a kind of conversations, and I think that will definitely make more power to the people who are indeed wanting to. And I think the one that you mentioned, like, it's actually should be aligned. When you say about what you say and what you do should be aligned, it's more about what we think and what we do, right? They should be aligned, right? The actions and the thoughts also should be aligned with the things what you mentioned, right? So that's definitely the thing, and I think that is one of the common mistakes that usually happening, and they need to be fixed up. But here is the thing, right? Till now we are just speaking all about the leadership and all about how a good leader can be and how he could be inspiring others, how he could be taking care of the people and taking it to the next level that they admire or that he or she admire, right? But let's look into another perspective. Like, let's look into the people's perspective, right? So what does it actually mean to you as a good member, like a good people? Like, what sort of characters or traits that you expect from your team member, specifically from you? Like, it can go abroad, but the thing is, I want to know your perspective of what you think of your people would be doing and their actions and their thoughts.
So wait, just so I'm clear on the question, Teja, this is, if I'm a leader, supervisor, manager of a team, what can I expect or what should I expect from the people who are showing up every day?
I think it got a bit.
Is that correct?
No, it got a bit different, but let me repeat that. So what you would be...
Okay, go ahead, sorry.
So the thing is, what I'm trying to say is that, so maybe, yeah, you can take it in that way. Yeah, that's true. What you meant is also true. Because it's also can be thinking that way. So yeah, please go ahead. Yeah, that's true. I get it.
No, I want to know how you meant it. Teja, you tell me how you meant it. I want to answer your question, not my question.
All right, so I'll get you that again. So we spoke all about leadership and how it about a good leader and what are the traits and the character of the good leaders, right? And how it can be more better. So let's look into the other perspective of people. So how can they be a better people? How can they be a better team member? So
got it. So team member, what do you expect of team members? Like if you're a follower, if you're a follower, what are some, okay, so I'll mention a few things that I think separate like the great followers, the inspiring followers from everyone else. So the inspiring followers are willing to speak truth to power.
When they feel safe.
When you, well, of course, the safety has to be there. When you see that there's a disconnect between what anyone has said and what they're doing. In other words, if you know that someone is always about, being on the same page with other people and they're high communicators, and you're noticing that they're not high communicating, you wouldn't walk over to them or call them or be on a Zoom call and be like, I've noticed you're not doing what you normally do. You would actually do it with caring. So it's what Kim Scott calls radical candor, or what we call on our team, candor with care. So what does candor mean? Candor means I'm willing to speak truth to you because I care about you so much. So this notion of leaders take care of the people around them, I think the same thing is true for team members and for followers, that you care so much about the people around you that you're willing to challenge them directly because you care about them personally. We had this, I had a situation on Simon's team, on the Sinek team, a couple of years ago. One of the other speakers on the team approached me one day and said, hey, is everything okay? Are you all right? I've noticed you're not showing up the way I know you're capable of. We had a conversation for 5 or 10 minutes. I got off the phone call and I was furious. How dare you? How could you? This is what I'm thinking to myself. I can't believe it. Why would you? Why would you? And I went over it for like a day. Like, what is it? Like, are you questioning my ability? Like, it was just, I went off the deep end. I went from 0 to 60. I was finally able to speak to someone else on the team and like, why do you think that person said that? And they said, it doesn't matter why they said it. What matters is where were they sourcing themselves from? It wasn't about, am I good or am I bad? He had said it out of love. They had said it out of love and out of caring. And it took a little while, a couple of days, but finally I had a chance to circle back with the person who had shared the feedback with me. And he was nervous. He thought I was going to be angry at him because I'd shut him out for a couple of days. But, this is pre-COVID. We hugged it out and we talked for a few minutes. And what I really came to realize is that he told me, it took him courage to share the feedback with me. It took courage. He had to take a risk to share the feedback with me. And I had to honor that. And even though he was saying I could do better, he was doing it not to say that he is better than me. He was doing it to say that I have more to offer, that I have more to give, that I could have more impact. So I think courage and care are two really important characteristics. And the other thing that I would expect from a teammate or a team member is to never stop learning. I'm so tired of people who think they know it all. I'm so tired of people who don't read and who aren't curious and who, all they do is listen to the news all day and doom scroll. Like, what are the podcasts that you're following? What are the books that you're reading? What are the blogs that what is the content that you are creating, that you are reflecting upon? What are your ideas that you're putting out into the world? Brene Brown calls it, she talks about the man in the arena. Like, are you in the arena? Because if you're not in the arena, then you're probably, you're not growing. And if you're not growing, then you're not improving. And if you're not improving, then you're just at a standstill and you can't contribute anymore. So I would just encourage anyone who's part of a team, like, what are you doing to improve, to learn, to grow? What's your growth mindset? And I love what you said before, Teja, like we have to experiment. If you're not willing to fail, like that's the value of failure, is learning. Like if you're not failing in some way, in some part of your life, you're not growing. Life is a bit of an uphill battle. It's a bit of an uphill struggle. So I like people who are curious. You know, I want a team member who's learning, who's growing, who's finding new ways to do things that they used to be doing, because COVID, if it's taught us anything, is no one knows how to do anything right now. Everyone is improvising. So that's what I would say. Have that experimental mindset. And the beauty of that is when you have an experimental mindset, you inspire other people to adopt an experimental mindset. You become a force multiplier. So that's what I would say. Care, courage, experimentation.
Totally. I think it's going to stick with me for a very, very, very long time from now, because I'd be always looking up to you, looking up to the words that you mentioned, and that will genuinely makes an impact. And the thing is, we're going to experiment, right? I'm going to figure it out.
Absolutely.
Like if can we go. And anyhow, I'll be sending you the feedback, how it's going to work, and how it's going up, and everything that helps. And they're totally right. But here's the thing, right? When the other person actually calling you, and he called you and he said that the performance of you is not up to the mark what you could be doing actually, right? There was a call. But the thing is that you felt a bit uncomfortable, right? It's very genuine. Like we felt that. We feel genuinely a bit uncomfortable when we get such a kind of call. But instead, what would be the thing that the other person would have done to make you comfortable and also realize that you are not doing enough work? What would be the instead work that you have done?
So
in your way,
So here's my feedback. And not only was I uncomfortable, I was angry. So let's call it what it actually was. I was pissed off.
Yeah.
And I think he made one mistake. And I've told him this. I've given him this feedback. So this is not public, hearing it for the first time. Like, sorry, buddy. He did it. He was cold. He was cold in his delivery.
Okay.
It was short and it was cold, and he didn't really give many examples, and he didn't hold the space. It was like a 6-minute call. And so I didn't have enough data, and he didn't give me enough to work with. Now, could he have done better? Of course. But I also need to show empathy for him, because he was taking a huge risk. He was scared too. He was scared to deliver this feedback. And that's what happens when we're scared to deliver feedback. We typically don't do it in the most optimal way because we're scared. You know, we're not at our best when we're scared. People think, ooh, you know, urgency, when it's really urgent in the last minute and the deadline, that's when I do my best work. That's not true. Science proves that when you're under stress, you do not perform in an optimal way. So I think when you're going to, deliver a hard message, you're going to, share something that may not necessarily be received in the way that you want it to be received. You really have to think carefully and reflect, what is the best way to do this? You have to recognize, okay, Heath, he's a deep thinker. He's going to want examples. I'm going to need to, talk about some things before. Like, you have to plan out those conversations. And I don't necessarily think he did that, as well as he could have. But that doesn't matter, because he was sourcing himself from a good place, and we eventually got to where we needed to get to, but it took more time and it took more effort and more conversations. And that's the thing. People don't realize, like, we end up wasting a lot of time on this, because it takes effort, and we only have a limited, time is our only, it's a renewable resource, but it's also like a limited resource. So is it renewable? I wonder. Is time renewable? Well, yeah, you get 24 new hours every single day, so it's renewable in that sense. But eventually, we all run out of time eventually. So I think there was a simpler path, and I think it's just about knowing who you're delivering the feedback to. And he was a little cold and didn't have enough data. That would be my one piece of feedback. But that's me. Other people are going to have different requirements.
Yeah, but and it's very actually very often, right? Like, people get to have a bit bad performance in the meantime, and actually the person who is taking care and the lead actually calls them up and tries to make them to understand how how bad it's the performance is that. But the thing is, I think the way we put up the things and the way we communicate to the other person will actually reflect back in different ways. So if that communication goes in a bit hurting manner, I think it's going to reflect in a different way. But if that communication goes in an inspiring manner and making them to realize the actual thing about their purposes, I think it's going to be more powerful, right? So as you mentioned about, so taking enough time and explaining the things what they're meant to be and understanding what it used to be happening further, right? So I think it's going to go ahead, right? So all right, so here's the thing, almost all about, we've been speaking about leadership and also all about how could they become more better, so everything. So here's the last thing that I really wanted to ask you, and the thing is, when I actually met you, I was in a room with another person where I was having a conversation. So we had the Start With Why workshops. If you're missing this, I think you should be following Heath to just get updated about Start With Why workshops and everything. It's a really fun, you should give it a try. And the thing is, when we are going through the whole workbook of Start With Why, so there are things like tell about your story, tell about the hard things that happen with you, and the other person should be noting it down. But later on we are in touch, and she actually questioned me like, Teja, I'm actually not liking what I'm doing right now. She's being in a business associate at the place where she's at, and she's not really loving it. And when I asked, like, what do you really love doing? And she said, I don't know. I don't know what I really love. I don't know what I'm good at. I don't know really what I'm passionate about. But, I was kind of a bit blank, but yeah, that's true, right? There's a lot of people out there, and also including me. I just questioned myself, what am I really good at? But I got an answer, but I don't know, was it so true? And sometimes I get a bit doubted about it, but anyhow, I've been going with the things, what I'm thinking about it now. But here's the thing, right? How could someone really know what they really love, and how could they find their why in a very short way? I know it takes a lot of time because you've been putting your all life and efforts in it.
It doesn't have to take a lot of time, and some people are able to find it more quickly than others. And there are some people who spend their entire lives and never find the thing that truly inspires them. And I think the way I think about it is this: your why, when we talk about our why, is not your job. It's sad when people define themselves by what they do. It's more inspirational to define yourselves by who you are at your best. And I believe that there are many different ways that you can be at your best. So let's just take me, for example, to connect people and ideas so we live with more meaning. There's so many different ways that I could do that. If someone said to me tomorrow, you can't work on Simon's team anymore, I would find another way to connect people and ideas. It's the reason when I was growing up, the one thing that I always did growing up is I always was volunteering to be a teacher or a mentor. Always. When I was 15, I broke my leg and I wasn't able to do sports. And they said, well, you have to do something. And they said, the local teenage community center needs a mentor. I was 17 years old at the time. I said, fine, sign me up. And I was a volunteer mentor. In university, I taught inner city kids as a volunteer. When I took a sabbatical and I was in Nepal for 3 months, I spent an entire month as a volunteer substitute teacher teaching 7, 8, 9-year-olds civics. And I stayed through the exams. Now, I didn't know my why back then, but when I look back, I realize, why was I drawn to these activities? Because they nourished me, because they fulfilled me, because they gave me an opportunity to be at my best. That's just one way to live my why. Another way is I used to do stand-up comedy. I know that's hard to believe that I would do stand-up comedy, but I did stand-up comedy. That's another way that I was able to express myself, connect people and ideas so we live with more meaning. I also do improv. I also do coaching. I could do blogging. You should be able to live your why 24 hours a day if you didn't sleep. You should be able to live your why with strangers, with friends, with colleagues, with customers. So I think first you have to separate what you do is not your why. What you do is one expression of your why. Now, the way that you find your why, I don't think it's complicated. I think if you come to one of our classes or you book a coaching session with one of the igniters, if you go to, hopefully you'll put this in the show notes, but simonsinek.com, we list all of these classes, but the one class that I think every single person on the planet has to take is Start with Why. And the way that you find your why is through stories. You tell your stories, and the stories will give you everything you need to know to figure out who you are at your best. Your why is just who you are at your best, with friends, with family, with strangers, with customers, with clients. Now, the harder job that you're talking about is finding ways to live your why. That's what you're talking about, Tisha. How do I find ways to live my why? Because finding your why is easy. I can find anyone's why in 2 hours. I promise you, 2 hours done. The hard part is finding ways to live your why, finding things that you're good at, finding jobs that you're passionate about, finding causes that you believe in, finding people who believe what you believe, and surrounding yourself with people who believe what you believe so that you could advance some sort of mission, some purpose, some cause. And a lot of us don't have that luxury, or we don't spend enough time exploring. I always tell people, tons of people come to me and they say, I'm looking for a job, and should I take this job or should I take that job? And I don't care what the job is. I care about the culture. I think one of the things that people miss is they don't spend enough time worrying about the environment in which they are going to be doing their job. They don't spend enough time thinking about the people with whom they are going to be doing their job. I would rather take a job that pays less to be surrounded by people who care about me and an organization that believes in things that I believe in, because eventually I will make up for the salary, cut that I took in order to be part of that organization. So, a lot of people that I work with, they say, find something that you love and then figure out a way to get paid for it. Well, sometimes the things that you love, you just can't get paid for, but you can find things that you're good at. Find things that you're good at and find a way to get paid for it. And make sure that you're surrounded by people who care about you or who have the capacity to care about you, and an organization that demonstrates care for the things that you care about. I think that's where people kind of get missed. They define themselves by what they do, and they confuse the what with the why. Because I can find your why. And then it's really your life's work is to figure out the ways to bring your why to life. And there are so many different ways to do that. I promise this will be the last thing that I say. I mean, a lot of people I work with, they quit their job, or they make a lot of money and they want to find purpose in something else. That's fantastic. They stop defining themselves by what they do. So I just think there are unlimited ways to live your why. Your why is not a singular thing. It's a bucket. It's an umbrella. It's a way for you to think about how you show up in the world and the difference that you're making in the people who are touched by your gifts.
Absolutely. I think for everyone out there who've been a leader or a member or a person's people, or also the person who is figuring out a why and the person who is actually striving for a change, I wanted to mold their enough beliefs into the things that they could bring value and everything. I think this conversation is a huge value pack for all of them who could actually transform into the things that they admire, right? And thank you so much for being here, Heath. It's one of the best and kind of a conversation that they could take help from it. It's a kind of a self-help for them, and not only in case of leadership but also in personal life, right? And they could become more better of their versions, and that's what they need at the end of the day, right? And they could empower other people being next to them, and they could be more inspired together with the positive environment, right? And with your thoughts and the beliefs that you've been building for years, I think that's possible. And the thing is that they need to apply it and they need to experiment with that, and they could figure that out. And that's the way to go ahead. And thank you so much for being here, Heath. Before we move off, if you feel like sharing something to the listeners out there, feel free to.
Yeah, just the final word. I'm working on a new presentation for a client in a couple of weeks, and it's trying to help us reimagine the situation that we all find ourselves in right now with COVID and the challenges that so many of us are facing. And, so many of us are in the process of reinventing and adjusting and adapting and evolving. And the thing that I would love to share with your listeners is that, you're not alone. You are not alone. And, sometimes we think of ourselves as an island, and so many of us feel isolated right now. And if there's, one thing that we can all do to make the this difficult time a little easier is to over-index on empathy. We spend so much time looking at ourselves. And just think about it. We're on Zoom calls all day long, and you're looking at yourself on the Zoom call all day long. And I've been encouraging people, turn off your self-view. Turn off your self-view in Zoom. Turn off your self-view in MS Teams. But that's really an analogy. The metaphor is stop thinking so much about yourself. Start thinking about other people. I know you mentioned the word self-help. It's really about helping others. And I think we spend too much time focused on ourselves and not enough time focused on other people in a positive way. So you're not alone. Turn off the self-view. Really, in Zoom and MS Teams and in our own lives. We have so much that we can do on behalf of other people, small gestures and differences that we can make in other people's lives. That is where the nourishment and the fulfillment comes from. I know we need to make money and we've got to pay the bills and we've got to be successful and we've got to grow. All of that is important, but I promise you, focusing on other people will help you grow. I promise.
Absolutely, and that made me to remind when you're speaking about it's not about getting something, it's also more about giving something towards the other people, and in return you get the things what you expected, right? In a more better way, in a even more higher way, right? So it's more here's the thing, right? Taking in different view. So like maybe we expect something without not trying to give something, right? And then same way we try to think more about ourselves, not about thinking the other self. Right. So I don't know, was that actually make much sense about you, the things, but that made me to recollect. But totally. And again, it's more about giving, I feel, in case of the things. Totally. So thank you so much for being here, Heath. And it's an amazing conversation with you, taking it forward. And you can actually share me everything that you mentioned about so that I could definitely put it in the episode notes below so that they could follow up, and make sure you put me the start with why things, because they should definitely try that, because that's the thing if they wanted to find their why. Right. So definitely. So thank you so much for being here, Heath. It's a really great time with you.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Teja.
Wow.